Welcome to Shores of Ignorance.
Welcome back.
This is Michael Vaclav.
Matt McCloskey.
Yeah. Well, it was fun. Last week we had David Ramirez on. And, it was great to have him on. And
It was.
you guys have been friends for a long time, which is really cool to
Yeah.
hear y'all talk about stuff again. So.
Yeah, I want to say I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised by how transparent and open he was, even in talking about some of the more difficult parts of his life, which was great. And I'm not surprised because he's always been that way. But I think it was just it was a pleasure. It's a great conversation to have.
Yeah, I thought the part where he was talking about his relationships and stuff, that how it was really all about him and how that's kind of changed for him over the years. And that seemed really kind of a hard thing to learn too.
Yeah, I think that specifically was what I was so surprised that he was so open about.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, so David, thanks for coming on. It was awesome.
Yeah.
But today on Shores of Ignorance,
that's us.
we got Mark Stoney. So Mark Stoney is a musician from Sheffield, and I've known him for, golly, I don't know, 10 years. 2006. What is today? 18. Probably about 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to beat his ass on darts all the time, and
we talked before the show. I heard that was definitely not true.
It's okay. He just cries. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, and I've actually known Mark for probably going on 5 years. We've only hung out a couple of times, but man, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I guess you just realized a second ago that you guys had actually played a show together.
That's right, we did. Yeah,
that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Now, Mark's had an amazing career of just absolute craziness all the time, and I don't know if we'll get into all of his story, probably different parts and pieces, but he's definitely someone who has come up against different challenges through his life, and keep seeing him step up and keep fighting. It must be like that British sort of like, I don't know, bulldog. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know what you're thinking of with that analogy.
I don't know.
British bulldog, is that a thing?
Know.
We'll have to ask.
I think of like a roister doister or something like that. I don't know.
What are you talking about?
Well, it's like, yeah. I don't know. So Mark Stoney, his band, or he's I guess self what is it called?
Proclaimed?
Self-proclaimed.
Titled?
Title, there you go.
Self-titled.
Stoney, and he's had a few records, and we're going to kind of get into it.
I think he should be self-proclaimed.
Stoney. Yeah, everybody always asks me, is that his real name, or is that like, no, that's his real name.
Mark Stoney. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing that I don't think we've ever announced, and some people have told me they didn't know, is that when we do these intros and talk about who we're bringing on and what we want to talk about and things like that, we always have our guests sitting here with us. You can hear Mark chuckling.
I wasn't sure at what point I'd stop pretending I wasn't here. I wanted to jump in, but...
Exactly.
And we do that because... we don't really tell our guests a lot about what we want to talk about. Often we don't know a lot about what we want to talk about, but we do this as a way to just sort of like prime the gears.
Totally.
So I wanted to let our listeners know that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think a couple things I know we kind of wanted to get into is just fatherhood. I think that's kind of a theme that we've been kind of looking at over the last few episodes. And also just I know Mark's had a really cool story with AA and drinking, and I think he's got some really fun things to kind of maybe explore in that area too. And I think one of your questions was, is it different from the UK version and the US version, and of how people interact and stuff? And
in AA?
In AA, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, So is there anything you can think of you want to jump into? Or
no, let's
just do it?
Go.
All right, sounds good. All right, Shores of Ignorance, and we'll be back with Mark Stoney.
Like a fleeting memory. Whatever you grab just turns to dust. Like eye contact with a stranger in a crowded room. Is a dream begging to be real. The passing note of a song. The glimmer of the shifting sea. You think you saw it, you think you see it,
You get to clap again, though.
Oh, good. I
Yeah.
love it.
Did you start a new video?
I'm about to. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're already on. I love it.
Cool. So excited.
I watched the YouTuber video about that.
About how to sync up audio and video.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
You can talk officially now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. So we're here with Mark Stoney.
Hi.
Hi. He flew over just for this interview right here. So
That's right.
awesome.
Things have really blown up on our podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll send you the invoice.
Yeah, it's about that.
No, you're actually here for something that sounds. How do I get into that? You're here for a good friend's memorial.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Seth Gibbs, who was my neighbour and bandmate when I lived in Austin. Met him first time I came to Austin in 2006 by chance. We really hit it off, and we played together for many years. And he was a very close friend of mine, a very dear man. And we played together in a band called Bobby Jealousy. And we were firm friends and kind of like brothers, really, ever since we met. And sadly, he passed away very recently on very aggressive stomach cancer, which went down very quickly indeed. And so I'd seen him just just a month and a half ago, and he just found out he was sick. And he passed while I was back in Sheffield, and his brother asked me to play a memorial show. He wanted a show rather than a funeral.
Yeah,
so which was really cool.
That is
so
really
it
cool.
Was, that's really what we did. We put on a party as a celebration of life, and the dude had written hundreds and hundreds of songs, literally. So we all gave it our best shot at sort of picking our favourite ones and playing them. So
that's really cool. Really a sad occasion.
Yeah, very sad. But it's one of those. To be honest, for me, it's a new experience. Grief, you know. I mean, I've lost people, but grandparents whose time was, had had a good innings, and school friends who perhaps I hadn't seen for a while. But
it's different
in terms of someone who occupied such a large part of my heart was and did for so many people here. He was he had a big impact, I think, on a lot of people in his short time. And so for me, there's balancing that feeling of real gratitude, and having felt very lucky to have known him with like a real searing loss. And it's still very, very surreal. It's very surreal. It sort of comes in waves, and doesn't quite seem real. But
the loss of a close friend is a much different experience than even losing a family member. It feels very different.
Yeah. I guess so. And but I mean, especially with but with his family as well. It's he was an actual brother to
right.
And son, and it's I can't really imagine it. But a wonderful man. So when his brother asked me to come over and be part of it, I was didn't hesitate. It was an honour, and helpful for me as well to be around people who knew and loved him, and as part of the healing process with that, I think, because back at home he'd met people over there who knew him, but not so obviously so much part of the community. So if you want to try and process it with people, so to be around other people who are feeling the sense of loss.
And you said he wanted to have a show instead of like a more sort of traditional.
Yeah, I guess so.
Funeral.
Yeah, that's what was what his brother had said. So I'm sure they might have had a private affair for him, but overall that's what he wanted, and I thought that was very fitting. It was always a party for any occasion. So yeah,
it was such a great way to gather together, as a musician, for him to bring people that he was close to in his life together to do the thing that united them.
Yeah, I think so. And it's one of those things. Well, the musician that he was, songwriter that he was, you know, so many bands in Austin that and beyond that he was such a big part of, so many records that he'd made that wouldn't exist otherwise. So it kind of feels like that life of his goes on and continues to sort of sprout new weird blooms every you know, for years to come. And a lot of his material hasn't been released because he was more a champion of others, but I think it will be.
I remember you telling me like just the different stories. I mean, I knew Seth a little bit, but I remember you kind of telling me, oh, he's helping out with this band or this people, or he's got 10 people sleeping on his couch, or like, there's always some, you know, it's like he always was giving a lot of himself to other people.
Almost infuriatingly. So it's like, dude, do something with your own stuff, you know. But he.
That's so fat. I remember even saying that back in the day too. Yeah. It's like he was just very talented, and you were kind of wanting him to kind of do stuff too. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think he will now. Yeah, it'll come out.
That's awesome. So. Well, you mentioned I don't know how you said this, but that you feel like you experienced grief differently this time, or is this like a time that you felt grief more?
Well, I think it's probably my first experience in terms of this kind of grief. I mean, there's grief, I think, with every kind of change, but yeah, this was a weird one. I'm generally quite reserved. Like, I haven't cried for about 10 years. I cry about once a decade. Yeah. And this one did it. It was a short little burst. I sounded like a foghorn, and I was very aware of my neighbours, and it just it was a big snot bubble came out, and I was like, oh, well, I've not had that experience before. But, it's still I'm still processing it, really, still wrestling with it, but it's an inevitable thing, I guess. I'm quite lucky that 38 years in, I've, you know, not really encountered this with death, at least. So.
Yeah, because I remember you lost your grandfather you were really close with. But
you know, he was in his 80s, and it didn't feel too soon. Yeah, you know,
something about losing somebody at a young age. Yeah, really affects you. I lost a really good friend and a bandmate, actually, when we were about 22, very unexpectedly, and that experience is still like seared in my memory. It's so strange and feels so unfair.
And I think when it's a kindred, you know, a peer, or where it could be like, you know, any one of us, you know, and that it sort of holds up a bit of a. It hits home more because, you know, it's closer to home. It's, you know, someone who's the same age as you, who does the same thing that you do, has the similar dreams, and you've journeyed together. And I think with bandmates especially, there's a unique kind of bond there that happens, that where band does become a bit like family, and you go through some very vulnerable times together that puts your friendship quite often on a sort of different level. It was for me anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Something about sharing the vulnerability with somebody, the vulnerability of creating and then performing music together, creates a bond unlike any I've ever had, I think.
And I think Seth and I wrestled some similar demons as well, and we'd you know, talk about that. We had that sort of similar thing. So it felt, I mean, to me, he was someone who deeply inspired me and changed my life, and I journeyed with through some pretty messed up stuff and some really great times as well. So it's and that I'm incredibly thankful for. But you do certainly feel a void there, even though we'd not I'd moved back to the UK in 2014, so we'd only see each other maybe once or twice a year for the last few years. But it was still such an impact. So yeah, that's why I'm back anyway.
Yeah, I didn't intend to kick it off straight there, but
pay tribute.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah, I think. Thank you. Yes, thoughts were with all those close to him, and it's a strange one.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome that you came in for it, though. I think that's cool.
Yeah, I'm glad I was able to, and I'm super grateful I got to hang with him, which a lot of people didn't even know he was sick, who loved him, and he'd just found out, and the music he was working, just finishing as much music as he could in his, while he could, and it was some real super cool, honest, vulnerable, heartbreaking, still funny at times stuff. And
is that stuff going to be put out?
Yeah, I'd imagine so. So I think his brother Jimmy, who plays in bands and ran Sweetheart Studio here in Austin with him, I think they've got a task of going through his computer hard drives and putting them together, something like 500 songs, but then the new ones, that were recorded as well. Gosh. Not all of them great, I'm sure, but a lot of them were.
That's just a lot of.
It was a huge amount.
A lot of.
Yeah,
that's prolific.
Yeah, it's that more than I do in 4 or 5 lifetimes. As a songwriter. So fair play to him. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that properly coming out.
I didn't know much of his music. I knew a little bit of the project. Y'all had a project together called
Bobby Jealousy.
I knew a little bit of that, but not much of his other work. But it sounds, listening to the stuff that he wrote after knowing he was sick before he died, that sounds to me like something I would really like to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I almost hesitate to say that, but there must be something so raw and honest in that. I mean, how could it not?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was somewhere he'd become, I've heard some of them. Well, first off, he was, when he sat down and he played me he had this song called, I think it was called The Way You Made Me. And it was absolutely gorgeous, but his voice sounded absolutely beautiful on it. And Seth was an astonishing multi-instrumentalist. He wasn't necessarily the strongest vocalist, but he was good. But it sounded like really, really great. And I was like, Seth, your voice sounds amazing. He said, that's the lung cancer for you. It gives it this kind of airy, wispy quality that I've always wanted, like this. And it was kind of like this gallows humour. We were talking about making a plugin, a lung cancer plugin that you could... So, he was always into the inappropriate comments, but and he liked the awkwardness. But there's a couple that he was too sick to sing, and so I think a singer called Jenny Carson and then Sabrina Ellis had picked up a couple, and so they were really beautiful. I don't actually know how far he got with it, but the ones I've heard were definitely among my favourites of his. So. I'm looking forward to hearing him too, and I think those who were around him and in the bands with him and his brother will do a grand job of making sure the world hears them.
I hope so.
Yeah,
totally. Well, So as far as today, you've been working on some music, and you kind of got to perform again.
I'm still making noises.
You're making some noises, all right.
Yeah, it's been a long journey with that.
Yeah.
So I'm 38 now. Are we all about that?
41.
41.
Oh, 36.
36.
Yeah.
You're the middle child.
Middle child, yeah.
We were talking before the show, and it sounds like you and I both kind of had some life stuff and a little bit of a gap in our musical output.
Yeah.
You feel like that's closing up for you? Like you're
I
creating
think
again?
there's a change coming about, a re-evaluation. I've been, I guess, making music professionally since... I've been making music since my teens, but signed my first record deal in my early 20s. So yeah, that would be what, 16, 17 years, and kind of bridging the gap between, well, when I first started doing it, I first signed a record deal with Island Records and Universal Records, and in my early 20s, when they were very much the gatekeepers of, you know, to make a record, you had to have a record deal, and to get it heard, you had to be played on the radio, and obviously that's changed a lot
right
now. So
thankfully, I think
I
was
yeah,
really
you know,
scared of it back when that all first started changing, but I feel like we get so much more good music now than we used to.
That's true, yeah. And just because I was, this is the thing, I mean, I was signed to these labels, but I never released anything under them. So it was as a common story that, you know, a lot of near misses, and then I sort of became a bit MySpace famous.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, MySpace.
I haven't heard the word MySpace in a very long time.
I know, right? I'm still stuck there, I know. I got 10,000 friends or whatever that I need to, a top 8 I need to maintain.
Oh, that's right. They made us rank our friends. I forgot
right.
about
Remember
that.
Yeah, I still do.
Do you really? That's awesome.
Mentally, you keep a piece of paper now.
I do, yeah.
All the MySpace stuff.
Tom's not in it anymore.
Poor Tom.
But yeah, so I went through a whole journey with that, and some fairly big opportunities, and but released very little music as a result of a sort of, I wouldn't say being, well, it's just the way it was. Made a lot of records, but didn't get to release all of them. And I think I became sort of well known in the industry, but never got beyond that in terms of, you know, releasing.
Whatever happened to all that music you made? Did you ever release it, or is it sitting on a shelf?
A lot of it
somewhere?
I had to re-record, some sitting on a shelf. But there was a lot of just, you know, records that I'd had, like I had a record that eventually came out, The Seen and the Unseen, my first sort of one that made an impact in the UK and a little beyond here in places too. But that was a record that had been really sort of finished 2 or 3 years earlier, but there was a lot of, it was going to be released by this label, then I had to re-record it because part of it being funded by this. A lot of, you know, kind of false starts and being flown over from place to place. So eventually when the record did come out, it was just it was just delays basically.
Yeah.
And it came out independently on my own because, you know, everything else had kind of fallen through. So as a result, my output was limited. But yeah, toured a bunch, had some good champions along the way, and been very fortunate that at times I've made a living, you know. And so, yeah, no, and these days I still make that. This was all under the name Stoney, which is my last name. But since in the digital age, lots of other Stoners have popped up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Most of them like West Coast rappers. So you go on Spotify and, you know, my last singles, you know, something about ganja and guns and things like that. And the algorithms get confused. And,
That's, you know, funny.
Hip hop stars supposed to be playing the Greystones in Sheffield, the notorious folk venue.
Oh, really?
And I'm doing a freestyle battle in Philadelphia or wherever it is. So
that's awesome.
So it's got a bit confusing.
Imagining you doing a freestyle battle is. I just want to sit and think about that for a minute.
I've seen him lay down the lyrics before. So yeah. I think that's what the kids say, right?
Lay down the lyrics.
Yeah, when it came out of my mouth, I was like, "Damn!"
I don't know. It sounded pretty cool.
Spitting flows. Yeah. Yo, dude.
Yo, dude.
Yeah. So I'm still making noises, but a lot of it's been in recent years writing for and with younger, prettier people, and some of it's producing, and I have been working on new material, but it'll probably be under a different project name. Just because as a sort of a sign of the evolution that I've been going through, and the fact that I've run Stoney through the mud. I've run that name through the mud, and a change of kind of the new material feels a bit different to past material. So I'm looking to maybe put it out under a different project name.
You feel like you ran the Stoney name through the mud musically or
Both,
reputation-wise?
Both.
Yeah.
Some venues won't have me.
Is that true?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's been enough time has passed. Still doing it, but it's slow. It's slow progress with me now.
Yeah. So I guess as through the years, I mean, you've kind of, you had the excitement of the labels, and then some of the ups and downs with actually getting the music out there. And I know, like, warehouse fires and and all that kind of stuff. Like, how?
Wait, is that a real thing? A warehouse fire?
A warehouse? Wait, the guy burned down his warehouse or something like that?
For legal reasons, I don't know what happened, but there was lots of stock that disappeared at times.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, carry on then.
Yeah. Just I guess for you, I mean, it seems like the last few years too, like with there's been a lot of kind of realization for you, and kind of like with music and also drinking and stuff like that. That's kind of like, seems like there's been some things that have kind of come together for you in some ways that, like, as an artist, can you look back and see that progression, or some of the things that kind of like really impacted you through that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I understand what you're saying in terms of one thing I will say, because I listened to the podcast with David last week, and one of the things he talked about was, he said a couple of times, was his songwriter is his identity. And that's what he does. It's his identity. And I think it's an interesting thing when you're releasing under your own name, like David is, and you were saying how honest he is in his, and transparent he is in his lyrics and his songs, and I agree, and where he's at. And for me, there's been this sort of, I agree with that, this identity, but for me it has been in the past in quite a negative way, perhaps. In that my identity is so wrapped up in this songwriter, musician. A lot of the things that happen in my life, or places that I'm accepted to, I think are because I make these noises, or and I think deep down there in there somewhere there was, it's your sense of self-worth is really tied in to being this character, which is me, and is, I too sing about what I know, but there's a point now where I am in my life. I'm like, well, who am I outside of that? Am I lovable without that? Am I still accepted without being, Stoney the musician or whatever? So I think that's partly the where I'm at now, where it's not where I can stand outside of that for the first time. There's a lot of new things at this stage of my life. Like you, I was married for a long time. I'd never been alone really until I was, mid-30s. A lot of the reasons why I needed sort of affirmation from audiences or stuff like this isn't quite there anymore as I've grown, and so I'm thinking, I stand up on stage and question why I'm doing it, because it's not stroking the ego in the way that I needed it to once.
You don't need it as much as you used to.
Yeah, but it was incredibly useful. Yeah, I did need it, So I'm kind of in a bit of a wrestling point with making music and who it is that I am.
When you play a show now and you feel part of that need not being there anymore, does something else come and take its place?
At first, absolutely terrified nerves, and I have, and it's another thing that's mentioned. I've been 3.5 years sober now. And there's a reprogramming that needs to happen in terms of confidence and things like that, and standing up on stage and actually being present rather than, having a bit of Dutch courage in you.
You got to replace the confidence with from somewhere else.
Yeah. And I'm not sure I've mastered that yet. Actually, that's I think there's a big questioning going on, but I'm hopeful that on the other side is something that's a little more, hopefully got a little more substance.
Is that learning process or reprogramming process, has that been enjoyable?
Enjoyable. Good things and bad things about it.
Sure.
I mean, in terms of, a lot of this comes from, shall we could talk about the sobriety element of it, if that's good. For some reason, I get all hot and flushed when I start talking.
We're kind of drilling you here.
Well, I brought it on myself, didn't I? Really.
Well, maybe we could just pause on that one topic there for a minute. And the reason I ask is I can imagine, as I get older, I don't find that I learn through, how do I phrase this? I don't learn through great difficulty very many things anymore. And I think when you're young, it's just all of your life is about learning new things, Just like the first time you pick up a guitar and you're trying to will your fingers into these crazy shapes, and you listen to a record and you're like, how the hell do they get it to sound like that? And even once you got the shape, and you go and over and over and over. As you were talking about sort of reprogramming, doing something that you knew how to do, yet all of a sudden sort of everything seems slightly different. The ins and outs, the joys and pains and fears all slightly misaligned to where they used to be. Part of me thought, I wonder if I think that might be enjoyable to me.
Right.
To have everything just skewed such that I've got to relearn this thing that I already know.
So it's fresh again. Yeah.
Is there any element of that? Or, I think your original response was that you had just like tons of nerves, and that makes total sense too.
Yeah. I see what you mean. It's quite similar. One of the things that I took up this year out of nowhere was acting classes, because I wanted to screen acting classes, not because I had the motivation, any ambitions to suddenly become an actor, but I wanted to feel what it was like to be a beginner again, without any expectations.
That's so cool.
When you've had such a slog at something, and so many near misses, or you've some successes and failures, and you want to feel that you have all this expectation, this heaviness that comes with that. So just to go in and with the sense of nothing to lose, that I want to learn how to do this, and it's still a creative thing. Was very liberating again, and so I'm trying to bring that back into the music again. Fall in love with it again, see things in a new way. There's part of that for sure, and I like that perspective. Okay, see this as a new start with you're coming with different motives, and so therefore if your roots are in different place, the fruit might be different.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna take that on board, because I wrestle with failure. A sense of failure. And tend not to see the successes, and I'm a terrible perfectionist. Nothing's perfect, so that leads to certain failure to be a perfectionist.
That's a great point, because I feel like a high amount of confidence often blinds you from what's actually really happening.
Right.
Because you're so confident that you're like, this is good. Screw anybody who says different. You're not in a relationship with the thing that you're confident about in quite the same way. If it gets super high.
Yeah, I guess a fine line between arrogance and confidence, but they're very different things, aren't they? I'd like to stepping out and being scared, being on stage and being present, feeling a lot more naked is really what it should be about, I think, you know, rather than a false arrogance or a confidence because I'm drunk. You know?
Yeah.
So it's more of a humbling place to be in, and yeah, it's a process. I'd be curious. It might be that what I'm writing at the moment is a pile of crap in other people's opinion, but we'll see.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope we see. I'd like to see.
So.
Well, like I don't know, you guys just talking about this. I think it's. Yeah, I always kind of am behind the scenes, so I don't really like you guys like really put yourselves like out there in front of people, like you are, you know, they're seeing exactly what you're doing, you know. And so as I'm listening to you guys talk about that, I'm just like, wow, it's like I'm starting to see like I'm so much more kind of like I kind of hide a little bit more, you know. It's like even this like, you know, doing podcasts and stuff like that. It's kind of like, I've talked about this before, but it's like, okay, I gotta like. You're going to say something that people are going to hear, you know, it's like, what are they going to think about that? Or what if I say something in the wrong way or someone misses the nuance of it, you know, it's like, which I, you know, like I really hate being misunderstood. Like that's one of the things that just drives me crazy, you know? So, but I see you guys as being a lot more like you're on stage in front of people and it's a lot more, you can't really hide there, you know, it's like,
Yeah, if it is vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's one of the things that I love about it. And I don't think I've ever felt quite as much myself as when I've played music in front of people in sort of an organized manner, a show, when I've played a show. These parts of you come out that...
Do up your fly zip. The zipper.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
Parts of your soul, Mark.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Of course. Yeah.
What kind of show is this?
Yeah.
It's true. And David said again the other week that it's never quite the same.
Right.
I spend a lot of time, too much time these days in the studio, and kind of getting everything, you know, this one take, working on a song sometimes for months and occasionally years.
Yeah.
And then live is that moment where the kind of the rubber hits the road, and actually, you know, I stood there before a gig and I was looking at, you know, people making noises or people who are standing there awkwardly clapping back, and I think, does anyone want to be here? Or, you know, this why are any of us doing this? And then just somehow what can happen on occasion that's kind of greater than the sum of its parts, where you change the atmosphere of a room, or one person might, you know, get deeply moved by something, or they come up and tell you how this song has got them through some, you know, tough times or stuff like that, and you get audience members who've, you know, really come up and grab you like they've known you for years and you might have only just met, and it's that the connection is incredibly humbling and makes it feel really worthwhile in that moment. And sometimes, you know, no one gives a shit and walk off, and that's fine too. Totally. You know, but there are moments where you feel like, after this last show, it's like, why am I doing this? Don't want to do this. Why does anyone care? And then afterwards, I'm like, I'm really glad I did that.
Yeah, totally.
So,
sorry about my dog. He keeps interrupting you.
It's quite all right. he's got something to say on it too.
Well, he's gotten in the habit at, like, halfway through every podcast, he starts wanting attention. And so this one, I thought, well, I'll have bones ready. But he's been through 3 now, and I think I've just trained him to do this more inadvertently.
This is how I get a bone.
Yeah, for your back. Oh, Luca. Yeah, I've been recording podcasts with my 2 sons actually when they come up.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
So my oldest son, but it's a very similar dynamic between the oldest one and my youngest one. The youngest one is like Luca the dog. he will sabotage and try and he's very funny. But Levi the oldest, who's it's basically about animal facts and things like that.
That's awesome.
We sit in a format similar to this, but it's got a few more fart noises and bum and willy jokes and things.
That's so cool you're doing that. We've been talking about having our kids on this podcast soon.
Totally.
Yeah, it's really great. But
do you make up dinosaurs too or something like that? Or is that
Yeah, Levi has every episode very meticulously planned.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
So if Quinn doesn't quite stick to the script, he does lose it a little bit. So it's quite hard to manage that situation. But yeah, it's animal facts and then mythological creatures and facts about animals that don't exist. So it's great.
You want to plug his channel so maybe get like a couple million views or something like that?
Well, maybe so. Yeah, we got to load it up yet. But it's called Lizards to Dragons.
Lizards to Dragons.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So Quinn's kind of like cool. the comedy relief then.
He's the comic, relief to Levi's straight man, and I'm kind of trying to manage that, keep order, some kind of order.
So did he come up with that, or was that something that you kind of spearheaded?
Well, I'd said in passing, Levi is 12, but he enjoys listening to podcasts. And, I said, in passing, next time you're up and staying with me, I've got a little recording studio. We should do a podcast.
Yeah.
And he was like, yes, absolutely. The next time I saw him, he had like a whole folder full of the episode planned out for the different things. I was like, okay, wow, you're actually doing this. I'd kind of done it as an offhand.
That's amazing.
Did you say how old he is?
The oldest is 12. Yeah, he just turned 12.
And he's planning the mountain. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that available? Like, do you post these?
I haven't yet, but I think I will.
I'd love to hear.
Yeah, we're about 3 episodes in.
That's cool.
And they're a riot. We've got theme tune and everything like that. The music that we made.
That's cool.
It's very similar to this. But
yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Just thinking about mythological creatures.
Look what you've done, Luca.
Do you get to see them very often, or are you kind of
not as much as I'd like. So we lived here in Austin, and then when Hannah and I broke up, she went near where we grew up in just south of London, and I lived in Sheffield just because that's where I could afford and where my home was, and so the distance is something that we have to work out because it's still a couple of 100 miles between them. They come up for holidays, and I see them for as many weekends as I can. Fortunately, all the relationships are good, so and it's not hostile. It's not a hostile situation, which says a lot for the ladies' grace rather than mine. But so we're working on that a little more. But not as much as I'd like.
Well, it's good that you guys have like a good talking relationship. That's always helpful.
Well, spend a lot of time being a huge part of each other's lives. I think that's a very foundational relationship.
Yeah.
Being together since you were 15 or whatever it was that we were. So,
yeah.
Oh, y'all got together at 15?
Yeah, we were at
a long
school.
time.
Yeah. So knew each other before that.
Wow.
A long old sentence for her. She served it well.
I always like the British humor. It's very self-deprecating.
Yes.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So what else we got?
Yeah.
Oh man. I don't know. I mean, I think that's something that I've really. You said you're a perfectionist, and I think that's something that as I've known you, it seems like that's something that's always been really challenging. It's like this. You just have this real intensity for seeing. Like I think the sword. Shoot, I screwed up. Sword before the wings. Like,
Saw before that. Yeah, there was a little EP.
Yeah. No, the bed. The one with the bed on it.
More Than Animals.
More Than Animals. Like
Yeah.
that was an amazing. I don't even call them records now, or what do you call them now?
Yeah, that was an album.
An album, there
a
you go.
long play, an LP.
Exactly. No, I just remember like it having such a huge varied of like everything from electronic to like what was it, the Albatross song? Like this is beautiful. I don't know. Anyways, I thought that was really...
It's very eclectic, which makes it very difficult to market.
Yeah.
But and that's a challenge with it. But
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a very varied record for sure, that crossed a lot of genres, but hopefully had some kind of cohesion to it.
Yeah. See, that was one of those ones where I was like, why did that not take off? Like that, I thought that was, I mean, I don't really necessarily know how, like, music industry type stuff, but I mean, that seemed like a really amazing record. I mean, EP or album. I'm trying to get the lingo down.
Well, ironically, it's kind of done. It's done all right for me because it's had a couple of the songs been on film and TV shows.
Oh, okay, cool.
That have meant that, and thanks to a great publishing company, Terrorbird Media. Thank you.
Nice.
But when I released that record, I mean, I fell apart. My whole life fell apart. It coincided with the divorce, a move back from the US to the UK, and a massive nervous breakdown and mental breakdown. So I wasn't really in a fit state to promote it.
Yeah.
And I think, that was a culmination of everything that was building up to that point. So it was quite a traumatic birth, that record. But it's out there in the world, and so hopefully it's had its moments. Like a couple of years after it came out, the little bits that popped up in TV shows and stuff like that, and the record label who I'm working with now might re-release it on vinyl and give it another push out, and I hope so because it's a record that I'm proud of, and it went down well. It was critically acclaimed, I think they call it. That's my thing. I think critically acclaimed, but commercially unsuccessful, and probably will be forever. But that's I was completely out of steam when I put it out, so I didn't tour it. I think we did a handful of shows here in Austin. Yeah. And then I had to go and get well.
Yeah.
Is that when you went? That's when you went back to the UK.
Yeah. So just a matter of months after that had come out. So after 7 years of living in the States, and I was drinking very heavily. I was very unhappy. A lot of my bad behaviour was blowing up in my face from the years before, and it was time to go back to the motherland.
You seem very well now.
Thank you. A lot better than I was, and part of that was eventually I did get into a 12-step program and got sober from, but things got a lot worse before that happened, and that was a turnaround for me.
Was there a turnaround moment, or?
There was a series of little turnaround moments that culminated in a big one. But I think, in the terminology of 12-step, they call it hitting bottom, don't they? Which always still makes me giggle. It's like a little child. Well, I hit bottom many times. Sitting there in the meeting going,
that means something different in English.
So,
did it feel like that though? Did you hit the bottom of something? Like, did you bottom out on?
I think it was more like banging. If you find yourself falling down, not banging bottoms, but if you find yourself falling down like a rocky crevice or something, you're just bouncing off all the sides, and then you thud and you think it's the bottom, then you roll over and there's another one. You keep going, and at some stage, you're like, it's that there was a series, and of basically what had happened was I eventually figured out that I was an alcoholic and an addict. I was wired in a certain way, and it was a progressive thing that obviously in the UK and lots of places in Europe, it's very much in the culture. It's a drinking culture, and there's a Luca. That's right. It was rough. And it's probably because I'm gesticulating too much. It's getting him wound up, isn't it? I gesticulate a lot. He thinks that I'm summoning him. What am I going to do with him? It's all good. We can work with it. Oh, bless him. So what was I saying? I'm probably deviating. Hitting bottom. Yeah, and the turnaround point. I think there was... Cut a long story short, there was a point where I just knew that I wasn't getting better on my own and that I was really rapidly declining, especially after I'd moved to Austin and I was back from Austin and I was on my own for the first time. And things had just turned really, really dark. And I couldn't stop drinking. I was drinking every day to oblivion till I passed out. I didn't know where I was going to wake up. I just got to that stage and I couldn't stop it however much I wanted to, and I felt absolutely hated myself, and there were a few starting to get involved with hard drugs and stuff like that, and there was like a moment where I realized I was gonna die pretty soon. And my hands were just completely off the wheel at that point. And I ended up coming back to Texas just to change my surroundings, thinking that might help things. But there's that saying, wherever you go, there you are. And, there was the same thing. And it was a few people who were who'd gone through 12-step programs and were familiar with them. And who put me into, who said, get in there, get in that AA program. Yeah. And there was a point of surrender, basically saying my life is unmanageable. I can't stop drinking on my own.
Sounds like, or was that point, you were trying to turn it around yourself and you had been realizing that you couldn't, like you said, your hands were tied.
Yeah, well, it's a weird thing that it very much seems like, well, it's me picking up the drink and putting the thing in my body. But once I started a drink, having one drink, I couldn't stop. Almost impossible. Occasionally I could, but I'd feel really dissatisfied. And so there was an education that I had in that is actually a condition where it's like a phenomena of craving. It's a disease. I always thought when they say alcoholism's a disease, they were talking about it as a metaphor, but I was corrected by a an addiction specialist here in Austin who said, no, it's, like diabetes or something like this. It's a progressive disease that, so you can drink quite manageably and functionally for years. But it gets to the point where you can't stop. And once you start, you can't stop. There's phenomena of craving. There is a mental obsession and a spiritual malady there as well. So,
and it was getting into the program where you started to like have that conversation. Did that help reframe what you needed to do in your mind to get well?
Yeah, it did. I went through a long, humiliating process of trying to prove to myself that I wasn't.
Right.
By holding back or trying to wean myself off or stuff like this. And then eventually, sooner or later, springing back full bender, hurting a lot of people, hurting myself, and realizing that I wasn't able to stop on my own. And so it was in a fellowship of AA in rural Texas, and my girlfriend who basically said, you need to get in there or you're not coming back, and dropped me at the doors of AA. So I walked in, and here in the States, so I didn't realise, is they have the prison system send their prisoners here. The first one I went into was a prisoners meeting. People in orange jumpsuits. And I was a skinny Englishman in a cravat in the middle of rural Texas. I think I'm a bit lost. They're like, sit down. And they kind of took me under their wing and probably saved my life, actually. I said I needed help, and learned about it, and have stayed in the fellowship of AA ever since. Working through a 12-step program, which is where our default program, which is to self-destruct, wired in a certain way for addiction or whatever. It gives you a replacement program that kind of involves some work and some honest searching of yourself, and is a slow, lifelong process that's based on day by day. It's a day by day reprieve rather than a cure, So that's based on kind of spiritual.
I love how you talk about the people that are surrounding you in there. It's like, it sounds like it. It's kind of like a, big old Texas guys, and you're the British.
Yeah, it is a bit like that.
Oh, Mark Stoney.
Yeah. Well, I got to the point where I got pretty unlovable. It was a pretty volatile mess at the end, and it took other people who'd been through that and had a bit of compassion. Yeah. Because I didn't have any for myself, and people who believed that something could be done. Yeah. So I'm very, very grateful for. I mean, there's a lot more to it than what I just said in a kind of mumbled way. So I guess this
St. Arnold's.
Yeah, there's now that you're filming this, there is what looks like a beer bottle in front of me, but I assure you it's root beer. Exactly. I didn't even know what kind of sodas I liked after I became sober, so I just went to anything that had beer or ale in it. And,
that's awesome.
That's been a relearning.
Well, I have to say, I mean, once you started going through AA and stuff, it was cool to see you kind of come back to yourself,
Yeah.
And just the peace I felt kind of kept returning, because I think, just it seemed like that weight was getting heavier and heavier on you, and to kind of see you kind of come out of that like a lot more lighter, even seeing you today, it's just really cool to see.
Thanks,
you
man.
in this place. So.
And that was one of the benefits of the program, is that you have to do like a big house cleaning, and the serenity and peace does return with this and that becomes the default. But you know, I made a lot of wreckage that I felt very troubled about that. But you know, my own mother said, you know, it's like the real you is starting to emerge again. You know, so that's encouraging to hear that too.
Yeah.
I could still be a total asshole.
But that's just normal asshole, though.
But,
you know?
I haven't got the
We all
excuse of
have.
saying, sorry, mate, I was so drunk.
That's the root beer talking. I
It's
don't
the
know.
root beer talking, yeah. So it's a work in progress, and I still go to those things, and still learning and growing in that sense. And now that, you know, the booze is out the way, there's other areas of life that are underneath that, you know.
Does that-
relationships. Yeah.
Does that reveal things about the other parts of your life?
Yeah, I think it does. I think there's a lot where I had kind of arrested development from when I started drinking, you know. So, but you know, I think lots of areas that, you know, where self-centeredness or agitation, the things that kind of that some of the characteristics that make up an alcoholic go into other areas of your life too, you know. So yeah, but one thing at a time.
Yeah, totally.
You know. Yeah. So, but I do find that program useful in other areas.
Yeah. Well, it does seem like there's also that part too, as we get older too. It's like, you know, you can't really, you can't hide from some of the things that you're able to get by with as a younger person. You know, it's like you're busy with all these things, but by the time you're getting into your 30s and 40s, you know, it's like things are starting to kind of stare you in the face. You know, it's like, and I think that's something that I don't know. It's like now where I am right now, I know there's things I don't see, and so part of that is like, it's like I want to know what those things are, and also I don't want to ask that question either. You know, it's like I find myself at odds in that space too. It's like I've seen things that have changed in my life, but then also it's like, and I want to change the things I don't know or I can't see, but there's still that part of me that's like, I don't know if I can do that, you know. If that makes sense. I don't know if that too,
is it like you get your life together enough sort of necessarily by the time you're maybe in your 30s or something, you can pretty much make sure things are operating enough to get you through the next day. And it's tempting to just sort of be like, that's enough. I don't want to keep like looking into stuff that's only going to cause trouble.
Exactly. But it just seems like it's just wrong. You know, it's like, I think that's the part that I feel like I come into is just sort of, I do know that, I need to keep growing. I need to kind of not be afraid to look into those spaces that, you know, I don't want to look into, you know, and also to know that I don't want to look into, there's certain places I don't want to look into. It's almost like a willing blindness, you know? And, I'm speaking very abstractly because it's more of something that, you know, this would take a long time, but you know, I hit rock bottom when I was 19. So that was my, like, I've told both of you guys the story, and maybe one time on the podcast I'll talk about it, but you know, I lost everything at that point, you know, and so it's, you know, so that was kind of like, I kind of was like a rebuilding, but then even then now at 40, you know, it's like having gone through that then, it's like that, just to know that there's more kind of a deeper spaces that I can go to now. So but
I think one of the things that a lot of these 12-step things, they the idea is that you surrender these things to something that isn't you, you know, a higher power, as they call it. So God as you understand him. So see, for a lot of people in Texas, that's Jesus or whatever. But for other people, it's like the group. It's basically saying, you know, this self-reliance for me doesn't get me anywhere, because when I'm running the show, I really mess things up. I get agitated. I don't have a sense of peace. So it's simplifying things to the point to wake up and meditate, get that spiritual connection with whatever your higher power is, and do the next right thing. So the idea being that you surrender this. I've got to change this about myself. I've got to change this about myself. You know, these are my character defects that are still blaring and that you basically surrender them so that they're kind of taken away in the order that your higher power sees fit. So it's quite a let off the hook in that way. Some people will have a difficulty with that spiritual concept of
that's kind of what I was wondering. Were you religious ever growing up?
My dad was a pastor of a church.
Oh wow.
So I was brought up. He wasn't from. He became pastor of a church when I was about 9, but switched from being a computer programmer to doing that. So it's a bit of a lifestyle change. And so I think it's pretty notorious globally that pastors' kids are like the most rebellious, go off the rails, the preachers' kids. I was no exception to that. But there was a lot of that religion there that actually I had to undo. I think there's a lot right with religion and a lot that isn't, but
is there ever any conflicts between people's religious point of views and the sort of views that are espoused during AA, like that sound very spiritual?
Well, a lot of it is actually based on, I think it can be a block for perhaps there can be. I think there's a real loose God as you understand him. So I guess if you're a hardline, tunnel visioned, this is the only way, then, I guess that might be a problem. But
or like, what does an atheist do?
There is a chapter in the AA book called Atheists and Agnostics. So basically, it's that same concept of you can't do this by yourself, can you? So can you surrender it to something that isn't you? Because that's your only way of surviving. So I can understand that, particularly those who've had a hard time with religious stuff, and I've got a lot of issues with it, and where it keeps people in control and shame and some of the negative things, and things they do right as well. But that was some of the shadows of it for me. That you'd have to behave in a certain way, and you weren't really being honest at all in those situations. You could. I lost my train of thought there on a religious rant, but agnostic and atheist. To basically be open-minded that there's something. You don't have to name it anything. So there are atheists and agnostics in the program, and there's a chapter in the big book, which is like the Alcoholics Anonymous Bible, that is specifically for agnostics, and I think it's called For Agnostics. And it tackles that. So, and I would probably, the more I know less about a God than I thought I did when I got into that program. The less I understand, but there's certainly, for me, there's been a spiritual transformation, because it was something that I certainly couldn't do by myself, and there was like a real psychic change and a rewiring and a spiritual change that it's felt like a rebirth of sorts.
You used the word earlier, surrender. That's what it really sounds like when you say that.
And that is the key of it, really, is realizing that your life's unmanageable, or are we allowed to swear on this podcast? Right. Are you, I think there's that fella Russell Brand who's around, he's kind of rephrasing some of it, is like, are you a little bit fucked? Can you unfuck yourself? Do you believe that something other than you might be able to help you get unfucked? It's like that concept basically, which is surrender.
He talks about his experience hitting bottom, and he's so eloquent and well spoken, while cursing a lot. But I love the way that he talks about it.
I got a really relate to a lot of his journey on a smaller scale, and the kind of restlessness. And it's really good to have people who are honest about that, and where we feel incomplete. The addictive nature that some of us have of like needing affirmation from people, or needing fame, or needing to change the way we feel, rather than being able to sit with the way that we feel, and surrender the way that we feel without annihilating ourselves. And some people are kind of a bit wired to and I'm one of them, and still am, unless I kind of surrender it on a daily basis. So that's going to sound like a lot of gobbledygook and hogwash to a lot of people, but it's been true of me, for sure.
It sounds fulfilling.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know. My mum had said to me quite recently that there was a point towards, actually not long after that record had come out, and I hadn't been back to the UK, and they thought the next time that the family was all going to be together was at my funeral. They actually thought that. I didn't realise that, but so that's encouraging to hear that there's been a bit of a turnaround in just the way that I am day to day. Is my default is now a lot more peaceful.
Dude, yeah. That's so cool.
And and you've seen me, Michael, in some of the darker spaces, and thanks for being a good friend in those times, by the way. But it was things got dark for a while, and made a lot of mess.
Yeah, but you're really beautiful now, which is cool.
Yeah.
I'm serious, dude.
I got quite bloated, didn't I? It wasn't good. And I mean, I still sweat a lot, but back then it was like, I look back at videos of just sweating and trembling like this, the whole time. So physically you do start to get better as well, which is nice.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to ask, like, what aspects of your health did you notice change through that?
Well, there's I got really sluggish, shaky, fat. Teeth had been, really in disarray. Still are, keep up the British stereotype. But I think looking back at photos for my sobriety, like a certain deadness in the eyes that actually I can be standard. You still got that. But and
there was a deadness then that has gone away now. That has come back to life.
Something else has come back. Yeah, I hope so.
Come back
But
to life.
that's maybe only I'd see that. But there was physically you feel a lot better, and just you sleep better. When you're not in a bush by the side of the road. And there's less fear and terror around, literally moments where you have your eyes closed and you come round in the morning and think, am I where I think I am? Mm-hmm. Did I make it home? Before you're too scared to open your eyes, And so not having that anymore is a big weight off. Wow. The physical transformation is a good one. It's good. The spiritual one is a longer road. But
how long has it been for you?
It was April 2015, my last drink. And so over 3.5 years. And I hadn't gone a day before that for probably 20 years.
Wow.
And it was getting worse and worse and worse. So it was quite a transformation, quite trippy. And people who, really helped me through that. And I did have to detox and go through some medication, so I didn't have seizures and stuff like that. But one day at a time. But I'm always aware that I could, slip up. I still have that propensity.
Yeah.
And I still think about it, but not very often.
Yeah.
It's not an obsession like it was, where I'd be here thinking, okay, has he got enough beer in the fridge? What time does the thing close? And I don't have that kind of obsession that I used to have when I was talking to you. Michael always had quite a few beers. It was all right.
I always brought my 6-pack.
And I'm fine being around it as well. That's the thing that surprises me. I still like going to pubs and
That's not a problem for you.
Yeah,
It is for some people, right?
Yeah, I think it, but not for me. Not at all. Well, it would be ridiculous. I'm a musician in bars the whole time.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's fun. I get to watch everyone else get drunk, then take advantage of them. I don't do that. I do a lot of designated driving.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, yeah, I noticed actually you guys drinking water and look what I'm like. Come on.
Oh no,
You're not doing that for me.
No. We always say we don't drink before or during the podcast, so we can actually try to be present, I guess the thing is.
Well, I think it could have gone either way.
Yeah.
We did make that decision on day one. We were just like, well, let's just not drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We might have like a special like whiskey thing.
A whiskey episode?
Yeah, whiskey episode.
Tasting? Yeah.
Well, it's a social thing, and particularly here. And, I'm sure you guys and a lot of that deep talking stuff comes when you had a bit of social lubrication.
Totally.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
I think the podcast,
I love you, man.
Yeah.
You're the greatest.
I think drinking can open up that like philosophical part of my brain sometimes, but there's also like this doing a podcast is so new for us, and I feel like my brain has to function somewhat differently. I'm like, I think that lubrication may not be what I need right now.
Yeah, I'm not endorsing
maybe like
it.
You're like, why aren't you guys getting drunk?
I said I'm fine with it. But yeah. Sometimes I do get annoyed if people don't drink.
Oh, yeah, totally.
I've go with my dad to a pub, and it's like, we're in a pub. You've got a designated driver.
Exactly.
It's like, well, I didn't know if you'd mind. It's like, no, get yourself it was on my birthday or something. He's like, oh, okay, then I'll get a pint, get yourself a pint. And then he orders a shot of whiskey. And I'm like, now you're taking the piss. My favourite scotch. Exactly. It's like, well, you can't.
That's awesome.
So no, I certainly don't feel uncomfortable when other people are around. But I used to feel uncomfortable if I was drinking and someone else wasn't. Yeah. And I wouldn't trust them. I really didn't like people who didn't drink around me as well, when I was. So I'm really sensitive to that I'm now that arsehole.
What didn't you trust in them? Like
well, it's almost like I realized that if I was, well, it was holding up a mirror to me, probably. I'm not, I'm sorry, you're better than me, do you? You're not drinking, Yeah.
It's pretty self-aware of you to see.
Well, I remember when you first when you had first stopped drinking, and then you came over to throw darts at the house, and I was like, well, I don't have to. You're like, no, get something to drink.
Yeah.
Like, right.
It's because he wanted to beat you.
I know, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
He's
Mark
playing you.
Mark got better at darts as he was drinking. I got worse. So
Trying to even us out.
Exactly. Anyways, well, dude, man, I'm just really thankful for all that you've shared. That's really
thanks. I don't feel I was very coherent all the time.
Oh, dude.
Do you edit it or do you just let it go?
We don't. No.
No.
Well, it's just better. I mean, even I think that's part of it. Is just a conversation, and we're not always like eloquent and that kind of stuff. So, but I was following you.
Yeah, same.
Good.
Yeah.
Glad you're here.
Well, I'm glad I'm here too.
Glad you're alive too.
Yeah. It's been yeah.
I know.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, here. Literally, figuratively, and metaphorically.
No, seriously. Knowing you for a short little while, like I'm glad that you've come through what you've come through, and you're here now, you're healthy, you're talking about this stuff, sharing your experience, sharing your journey. It's enriching me. So I'm thankful for it. Thankful for you.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Yeah, especially investing also in kind of the next generation of artists too, with Courtney, and I think you've done a couple other things too.
Yeah. I think that it gets to a point, like you're saying, with age as well, where you're like, there becomes a point where you start maybe turning and wanting to invest in the next, and instead of just trying to forge your own path. I guess that might be a natural part of our evolution as we edge towards the grave. So
I don't know, dude. I think you got some more stuff in you. So
we'll see.
Yeah,
life in this old dog.
I know you do, man.
Yeah,
you got a lot of stuff stirring in there. So at least I want to see it. I'm more selfish in that way. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out.
Been an honor.
Yeah, so Mark Stoney, we'll put links to his music and stuff. Go buy a lot of it. It's awesome. So, so this is Shores of Ignorance with Michael Vaclav.
And I'm Matt McCloskey.
Yeah, thanks for coming out, guys.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Bye.